Coming up on Theater Talk.
But I'm not a prophet. Like, I'm not in any way posing as a prophet. I just really want to just make a prophet.
Theater Talk is made possible in part by the CUNY TV Foundation.
I was God, but I wasn't really godding, you know? I wasn't creating or destroying or judging anybody, which was something I'd always wanted to try.
From New York City, this is Theater Talk. I'm Susan Haskins.
And I'm Michael Riedel of the New York Post. The first new show of the new Broadway season.
That's right. It's
Susan,
here.
is An Act of God, a new comedy starring Jim Parsons, who's had a minor little career there in TV of late, and written by an old friend of ours, David Javerbaum, who was here several years ago with his musical Crybaby. And David, I think you made your singing debut on television.
It was 2008. I made my singing debut. I made the regrettable mistake of singing the song Screw Loose, which I had written with our composer, Adam Schlesinger, and I sang it here. And then a couple of years later, when I was leaving The Daily Show after a long tenure there, John was nice enough to point out that I was leaving and thank me for my service. And in tribute to me, he played a clip of me singing the end of that song. I'll be here if you need a loose screw. Whoops. Which was wonderfully humiliating and a fitting tribute because I'm a better writer than I am a singer.
Hey, yeah. But you know, tell Stewart we didn't get any royalties from that show, so we're still waiting over here.
Okay, I'll
fair use is one thing, but come on, I mean,
I apologize on behalf of the entire show.
Thank you very much. All right, your new play, An Act of God, a new comedy, it says. I don't want to put you on the spot here, but you do have a relationship with God, do you not?
Yes, I mean, obviously, you know, everybody does in some way, but I have a very personal.
But you're a little closer to him than most people are.
Yeah, I've been, you know, his sort of ghostwriter, his humor punch-up guy now for about 4 or 5 years, working with him fairly closely, more closely than I would necessarily like.
You did a best-selling book?
I don't know if it was a best-selling book. I mean, God has written a couple of best-selling books before me.
Before you, yes.
Right.
Although none of them actually earned him any royalties. That was the problem. They were all done sort of before there was a sort of a money trail that you could follow contractually.
That's right.
So
the Bible's always been in the public domain, I think.
Yeah, Bible's a public domain book. I mean, imagine the royalties he would have earned had that not been PD.
He would be L. Ron Hubbard.
Yeah, he'd be L. Ron Hubbard. Yeah. I'm sure he would love that.
Yeah.
So he wanted to do a new book, and he contacted me about 5 years ago, and he asked me if I would just sort of do the punch-up on some of the jokes he wanted to get in there, because he's not very funny.
Right.
You know, if you've seen his work in the last 5,000 or 6,000 years, you know, he's not like a funny god. So I said, okay. He came right to me in my office in the form of a burning couch. My couch was burning, did not consume. It burned, it smelled, it was naugahyde. So, and I told him I'd love to, but you know, there's a protocol. You got to contact my agent. But as it turned out, we have the same literary agent.
Right.
So we worked it out, and I wrote a book with him, and I've also been probably more familiarly to some people tweeting as the tweet of God for about 5 years. And my only involvement with those tweets is that I type them and I send them. Mm-hmm. But they're obviously straight from his mind.
What's the voice sound like? I mean, I've never heard him speak before, but
it's a little like Gilbert Gottfried, I would say. A little bit like Gilbert Gottfried. It's surprising.
Does he come to you at any time? I mean, could he like wake up in the middle of the night? I mean, there are no boundaries when he's dealing with you?
His ego boundaries are not what they should be, probably. He'll come at any time. He'll come wake me up in the middle of the night, or when I'm at work. He's not a comedy writer. I have a day job, but he doesn't seem to really care about that. He'll just come in and do what he thinks he needs to do.
So in your show, you have a popular television personality, Jim Parsons, portraying God. Was this his choice? God's choice?
Yeah, it was God's choice. We both thought Jim was a great choice, especially because Jim is so inherently likable.
Yes.
And so inherently winning.
Yes.
And so inherently funny. And God is none of those things. So he really wanted to sort of work against type and sort of make himself much more sympathetic and likable than I think deep down he knows he actually is.
Because I had heard, though, originally that God wanted Shia LaBeouf to play him.
No, we do have a Shia LaBeouf reference in the show, though.
Oh, I see. Right.
Yes,
right.
we do. It's a reference to him, you know, appearing at Cabaret drunk and getting tossed out a year ago.
In the same theater.
In the same theater.
No, right, Studio 54, exactly.
Studio 54.
In this play, though, you have God rewriting the Ten Commandments, not to give anything away, but he dictated all these to you.
That's right. There are 2 holdovers of the 10, and then there's 8 new commandments.
Yes. You emblazon them on the set?
Yes, we physically create the 10 commandments, or I should say recreate the new 10 commandments on the set.
And then you have 2 wonderful angels. Well, I don't know if they're wonderful, but they're very effective angels, played by Tim Kazurinsky and Christopher Fitzgerald. But Christopher is questioning God. Now, what does God think of these questions? Because the God in your play does not like them.
Well, yes. The idea at first is that Chris's job is to sort of ask questions on behalf of the audience, for God, to God.
Right.
And then as the play unwinds, the questions become a little bit too uncomfortable for God to handle.
Yes.
And he reacts, let's say, accordingly.
Yes.
But he is sort of the spokesman for humanity, which from time to time over the millennia has had some questions for the Creator.
Well, do you ask God questions, or you just listen and type?
I've learned that he doesn't listen to anything I say or what anybody says, so I just sit there and type. And I just asked. I did get him to agree that I can get my share of the gross on this, which is great.
He's cut you a little bit. I'm curious just about his working habits. Does he use a computer now, or does he still write on stone tablets?
He recently modernized to parchment and quill.
Oh.
So he's now at a medieval level of technology. So he's now past the ancient level of the tablet. So he thinks he's very sort of hip now.
Is it because he's old and can't learn new skills?
Well, he's infinite. I don't even know if that's a number at
yeah.
that point. As he says in the play, he's omniscient, but that doesn't mean he knows everything. It means he's capable of knowing everything, but usually chooses not to.
What's your religious background, if I may ask? And did he pick you because of that now?
I'm Jewish. I went to a conservative Jewish temple when I was growing up, but I wouldn't say that my household was particularly religious. And I'm certainly not religious at all. Neither am I rebelling against a religious childhood. I don't really know why he chose me. I really don't know. There's lots of other people he could have chosen. But I do know that as a comedy writer, I can tell you that working in the voice of God, it gives you a legitimate reason and an excuse to write about anything and everything you want to write about, because it's organic. It's God. He knows all. He sees all. He would care about all, have an opinion about all. So it felt like a very natural way for me to sort of start talking about things.
He even had an opinion on the Book of Job.
Yes, the Book of Job has always been the book that people...
Because that's the funniest book, I think, in the Bible.
That's exactly what it says in the show.
I gave right the joke.
That's exactly, yes. It's the funniest book in the Bible, the Book of Job. It's funnier than both the Book of Mormon and the Book of Mormon.
That's right, yeah.
And that's also the one that gave us Satan, the word Satan, which means adversary in Aramaic.
Since you spent a lot of time with God, have you had any dealings with Satan at all? Does God talk much about Satan to you? I mean, because they used to be friends.
There's still there's still a respect. It's like a Pepsi-Coke thing. Like, there's a rivalry, but there's also a fundamental respect. Mm-hmm. Ohio State, Michigan would be another example. like it's a deep-seated respect, but, there's a surface rivalry.
Right. Did you interview the devil or talk to him at all to try to get some insights when you were working with God? I mean, did he give you the freedom to kind of
I have not met with the devil.
So he didn't try to horn in any way on this project?
No, he did not
He's
try
going to review the play, though, isn't he?
Satan?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would imagine.
He's going to write about it in his column.
Yeah, I mean, Satan, reviews the play. It's people like Satan who often, come and review these things.
Which new commandment were you the most astonished by?
Well, I was happy that one of them was thou shalt not tell others whom to fornicate.
Yeah.
Because that's nice. I mean, we happen to coincide in our position on gay rights on that one. So that was a rare case where God and I were in agreement about something.
Well, is he pandering to the masses to bring that one up?
He's pandering perhaps to the masses who would go to see a Broadway show.
Well, yes, of course.
I'm not sure the Broadway audience in general would be considered the masses in the grand scheme of American culture.
Was it his idea or your idea to adapt the book for the stage? Because I've heard he's kind of a show queen, isn't he?
Yes. As he says in the show, he's not as much of a queen as his little superstar, but he is a bit of a theater queen. It was my idea, and then we were pursued by a couple of people in theater. Most importantly, the producer Jeffrey Finn, who's been a wonderful friend and producer. He contacted me and said, we want to do this. I want to do this and mount it and make it a show. And ever since then, we've been working to adapt the book and the Twitter account. But really, it's mostly new stuff. It's mostly new stuff in the play that we wanted to make a theatrical experience, have a beginning and a middle and an end, and feel like something that you needed to go to a theater to see rather than just read in a book or the tweets that I send.
Do you know what he's going to wear to opening night?
Probably the robe.
Yeah.
Probably
Does he do the crown still?
The sandal.
Well,
no, that's
Jesus.
Junior. No, the robe and he might wear like a tux over the robe.
Oh.
I mean, I'm assuming.
But he'll be invisible.
Well, yes.
But
I'll see.
You can see him, don't you?
I see him sometimes. It depends. I mean, theoretically, he's everywhere at all times, but in reality, like a lot of friggin' good that doesn't.
But I want to hand it to your director, Joe Mantello, and your set designer.
Scott Pask. Joe Mantello and Scott Pask are respectively the best at what they do
Yes,
in,
it's
in
pretty
theater.
spectacular
And
stuff.
the fact that they are involved in this show and want to devote their time and their energy to bringing it to life is just an incredible validation for me, and Jim Parsons.
So not only do you get to see Jim Parsons, who's the highest Q rating in television and real big star, you get to see your puzzle in the playbill. I just want to add that.
Yes, that is true. I'm happy to say that there is a word find in the playbill. It's a word find where you find false gods, and I assure you, as it says in the playbill, if you find all the words and cross out all the false gods, the remaining letters will spell out a message directly from the Almighty.
So this is...
Can't beat that.
You can't beat that. There's been thousands and thousands of false gods. Luckily, there's only one true one, and that's the one Jim Parsons is playing in the show.
And when this play's up and running, are you going to continue to collaborate with him, or are you going to sort of strike out on your own?
I wish it were up to me, Michael. It's not up to me. It's whatever he wants to do. If he wants to do, I think he likes showbiz, and I think he might want to do a movie, which screenwriting is very difficult, so I hope it's not that. I hope it's something more up my style.
So you may have to spend some time with him out on the coast?
Yeah, probably Palm Springs or something like that. Just some retreat. I don't know. I don't know. But I'm not a prophet. Like, I'm not in any way posing as a prophet. I just really want to just make a prophet.
Okay. The show is an Act of God, a new comedy by David Javerbaum, who has collaborated with God, who Susan did invite to be on the show. But, I mean, I know he's here because he's everywhere, but... frankly, his people are a little difficult to deal with.
I'm sorry. You probably saw that he and I were together doing New York 1, and I apologize that he's not here today.
Well, we're canceling this show.
That's out. That's it.
Yeah. So, but he's in our hearts.
Yes. No, he's in all of our hearts.
That's true. So,
I think about him all the time.
and I mean that.
All right, An Act of God, a new comedy by David Javerbaum at Studio 54.
The most godless place in the universe.
That's right. Oh, right. Of course, I forgot about it. The
Yeah.
place where everybody did all sorts of drugs and all sorts of sex back then.
The fact that he's playing there makes him very, very happy.
Okay, excellent. Okay. Thank you very much for being our guest tonight.
Thank you for having me.
I do not influence the outcome of sporting events to affect the winner. Are we clear? I only, on extremely rare occasions, influence the outcome of sporting events to affect the spread.
We're going to talk now about one of New York's theatrical treasures, the York Theater Company. We are joined by Jim Morgan, the producing artistic director of the York, and two creatives of the York's current production, Cagney. Robert Creighton, the star, lyricist, and composer of Cagney, with Christopher McGovern. And the director of Cagney, Bill Castellino. So the York is dedicated to, I'm reading your mission here, developing and producing new musicals and preserving neglected, notable shows from the past. This is one of your new musicals, Jim. How did you find it?
Well, actually, it came about because Bill was directing something else for us a couple of years ago. The first time we worked together was a show called Ionescapade, which was a celebration of Eugene Ionesco's work. And Bill mentioned this show to me that they had done already twice in Florida, once in Canada, in full productions. And he said, I really think it's ready for a New York premiere. And I think it'd be great in your theater. And that was the beginning of the talk. It's taken, 3.5 years or something to make that happen. But
that's a
we're
short
so
time
excited.
for many. You're so
Absolutely. When,
So, Robert, this was your baby doing a musical about Cagney.
I mean, is this because you looked in the mirror and you
Yes.
said, I look like James Cagney, so I'm going to cast myself as James Cagney?
Well, not quite, but almost. I had an acting teacher at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts 20 plus years ago, who said, "You remind me of Jimmy Cagney. You're kind of built like him. I know you tap dance, da-da-da." And all I knew at that point was Yankee Doodle Dandy. I loved old musicals. At that point, though, I'd already lost the dream. When I was a kid, I wanted to be Fred Astaire, but clearly that wasn't happening. So.
That's Jeff Denman, another actor.
That's right. That's somebody else. That's not me. So I started watching all of Cagney's films and reading about who he was as a person, and I just became sort of obsessed, yes, with Cagney. Not even at that right then thinking about doing a show about him, but just who he was as an actor, and I did really feel a connection to him in a way. And then I met the executor of his estate, who was trying to put a play together at the time, and a gentleman who was the marketing director, his claim to fame, of O Calcutta, his name was David Joy, wrote a play, but it wasn't really a play, it was just chunks of biography put on paper, and I went through this whole audition process and went upstate and auditioned for Marge Zimmerman and all of Cagney's friends. Floyd Patterson, the world champion boxer, was there, and all his neighbors. And
Marge Zimmerman had been Cagney's caretaker.
And then ultimately the executor of his estate, and Cagney left his estate to her.
Is the Cagney image trademarked in any way? I mean, you can't use a Marilyn Monroe image. Is the Cagney estate, do they protect the Cagney image?
No, mostly we deal with Warner Brothers in that regard, but the Cagney estate is not really involved, and I know a great-granddaughter, and have reached out and stuff, but they're not really, we fall into the tribute category. So,
oh, that's good.
What was your attraction to this musical about Cagney?
Well, I got the call from Chris McGovern when he first got involved with this, and I had done a couple of shows in Florida, mostly new musicals, and they said they were looking for somebody to work as a dramaturg and as a director. And when I looked at the material, this is so provocative, because I don't think I knew more about Cagney than your average bear. But I learned reading the script, and then you meet Bobby and go, oh, well, this is a good idea. I mean, this is an actor who was born to play the role. And when that started working, and as an author and working with the writers, it just seemed clear that this was a story that needed to be told.
As I'm listening to you, I'm thinking, did Cagney have a dark secret?
That's the right question to ask, because often we're saying, gosh, we wish he were more messed up. The drama would sort of unfold in its own way. But I think because of his life being so, in a way, blessed, and because of his devotion to his craft and his excellence as an actor, we were forced to find another way of exposing a conflict in the show.
And I would say it became blessed. He started born on the Lower East Side of New York, which is one of the things that excites me so much about telling this story in New York. Born on the Lower East Side, dirt poor, worked 4 jobs all through his teenage years, just to support the family. A strong Irish mother, a father who was a lovable guy but at the bars and not really involved in supporting the family, and got his first job just because he needed a job. It was a show called Every Sailor on the Upper East Side on East 81st Street. I was a holdover from the First World War. It was a bunch of guys dressed in drag, and Cagney got this vaudeville job because he was a pretty good dancer and could imitate.
Where did he learn to dance?
Well, he just knew on the street, like he had learned the Peabody from his mother, and knew, one of his great skills was he could look at a step and then imitate it. And that's how he learned to dance. He didn't take classes or anything early on.
Had he ever been a thuggish kid, or no?
Well, he was a fighter, definitely.
He was a fighter, yeah.
If you read his book, Cagney by Cagney, the first 30 pages are all, every other page, he's talking about a street fight he had, or sticking up for his brother, or going to knock on the door and waiting for the guy's nose to heal so they could pick up their fight where they left off. I mean,
did he want to be more of a song and dance man?
But
he did not want to be pigeonholed as a gangster.
That's right. He felt like a song and dance man and an artist, and wanted to put that in the world, but was pushed into this persona. And what really happened in meeting Bill and Christopher, we're telling the story in a certain way, and then Bill came along. We sort of broke it down and built it back up with these findings, because Bill started asking these questions. Well, he was married to his wife for 66 years. He wasn't a drinker. He didn't have
the Oscar.
He was an Irish guy who didn't drink. There's a musical for you.
But he gets the Oscar for Yankee Doodle.
That's right, Yankee Doodle. Without being a spoiler about our play, it's important to notice that he sort of got consumed into the Hollywood story. And he sort of woke up one day, as we tell it, and went, wait a minute, I'm not proud of the character that everybody thinks I am.
Right.
There's somebody else in here that has not been, because in those days, stars were really stars. I mean, they were nobodies. They got taken off the street, and before they knew it, they were remodeled by the studio and managed by the studios, packaged by the studios in a way that, is probably more common now.
But they weren't paid enough, you said to us earlier.
Well, yeah, the stars didn't get the kind of money that movie
That's
stars
right.
did.
Well, Cagney started on a $400 a week. We went out on a 3-week contract tryout, and then he signed I think it was 5 or 7 year contract for $400 a week, and would make films. He's making 5 and 6 films a year his first 5 years. And then Public Enemy came along, and overnight he was a huge star after that. But he kept working in the factory system, even though his films, like he was one of the biggest stars all of a sudden, and his films were making a couple $1 million, and he was still getting
$400.
That's right.
Oh my
And
God.
finally, he said, I've had enough of that, and he literally walked out of his contract and left. And Warner threw a fit, of course, as you would, but through the legal battle, Cagney won and came back with a new contract.
And you can see how the union idea comes into this. This is one of the themes, sticking up, bonding together. There was no union then. And there's some connection, we think, about his sticking up for the little guy, whether it's on the street or sticking up for his brother or speaking up for himself to a studio head, which took a lot of
And ultimately all the actors.
That's correct.
Well, Jim, I wanted to ask you, when was the York Theatre founded, and what was the inspiration for it?
1969, Janet Hayes Walker and a group of other actors who had worked together in regional theater decided to create a theater in New York that they had some say in the shows they were seen in New York. They didn't do musicals at all, actually, till I was around. It was my passion, but Janet had an incredible background in musical theater, music and musical theater. And so out of discussions that we had, we began doing one a year. Always rather esoteric, shows that were not being done elsewhere, shows that deserve to be looked at again. And then when we moved downtown to St. Peter's in '92, we began focusing more on the musical end of things. And our focus became new musicals, and the older shows were done in our Musicals and Mufti series, where we've just celebrated our 100th production.
You have a remarkable track record, and I was stunned when you told me that you have been at the York Theatre for 40 years.
It was all just happenstance. My aunt and uncle went to Church of the Heavenly Rest, where we used to be. And
on
I
Fifth
asked
Avenue
them,
and
5th Avenue and 90th Street.
That's what I remember
where
going up there.
Yeah, we did a lot of shows up there.
Right around the corner
25
from
years.
where Cagney
25
grew
years.
up, incidentally. Just
And
a couple
you're-
No, we grew up.
You're
Cagney grew
doing-
up
Yorkville, yeah, 79th Street.
You're doing the set for Cagney.
I am. I
How
do a
mu-
lot of the scenery.
You do a lot of the scenery.
Yeah.
You've drifted, you say, more toward musicals now, but will you still do plays or
No,
non-musical?
for the last almost 20 years, we've done nothing but musical theater.
musicals.
We specialize in that. I thought it gave us a niche in the marketplace that we didn't have. I think it made it clear who we were and what we did. Really, what's put us on the map are the recordings that we've done. We have almost 40 recordings of the shows that we've done.
What are some of the productions you're most proud of? I know you love all
Cagney.
your children. Cagney.
Hello.
What is he going to say?
My
was
most
sitting right
favorite
here.
ever. Various ones in no particular order. Yank, the
that
musical
was-
of musicals, Souvenir, Revivals, Sweeney Todd that moved to Circle in the Square, also known as Teeny Todd.
Right, that was the stripped.
Pacific Overtures.
You were doing these stripped down bear versions of things
Yes.
before John Doyle came along.
That's
and
exactly
stripped them all
right.
down.
In fact, early on, 87, I believe, Betty Comden, Adolph Green, and Cy Coleman came to Janet and me and said, listen, you all are so famous for making big shows small. Will you take 20th Century and prove it can be done small, because no one is renting it? We're afraid people are never going to do it because they're afraid of it. And so we agreed to do it. It was the first time we ever asked for enhancement, and we didn't. It was a big hit. It almost moved commercially.
I remember that, yeah.
Well, if you haven't been to the York Theatre, viewers, you should get there for Cagney. Tell the address again.
It's we're at 54th and Lexington in St. Peter's Church, right on
Yes,
the corner.
yes.
You enter on 54th Street. The previews begin May 19th. We open May 28th, and we run well into June, almost to the end of June, and we
Wonderful.
hope to extend beyond.
And do you take Cagney up through to the end of his life? Those years where he lived kind of reclusively up in his house and
No, really, we're at the Lifetime Achievement Awards in 1978, so he was born in 1899, so... and then we go back to just as he was getting into vaudeville, sort of working, on the streets. There's Rick Sordelay, the Broadway fight director.
Yeah, perfect
We have
for a Cagney musical, Rick.
Yeah, and we have a fight that the audience is going to hold their breath about, and then from there we go through vaudeville, Broadway, briefly, and then out to Hollywood, and sort of the representative of the factory system you were talking about, which Bill came up with a wonderful storytelling way of do that. The writer's room and involves a lot of tap dancing. And
Speaking of tap dancing.
There's a lot of tap dancing. A lot.
And there's Josh Bergas doing our choreography.
My quads are seizing as we speak right now. We ran here from rehearsal, so.
And I hope you got a couple like Tommy guns in there.
Oh yeah, there's guns, but it goes up then until through sort of white heat, and that's sort of where in his filmography, that's sort of where we end.
Can you say "Top of the World," Ma?
Yeah, I say it very loud in the show,
right.
but he never actually did say "you dirty rat."
Oh,
he said, but he did say "top of the world." I'm not going to. Right. You got to wait for it.
Don't give it away.
I got to.
You got to pay for that.
And Cagney, when Cagney won his Oscar for Yankee Doodle Dandy, and he always said in interviews, if you read them, they asked him about imitating George M. Cohan. He said, "I don't believe in imitation because then you can only do what they did. You imitate. You can't." He said, "You take their essence, and I dance like him, and then I do it for real. I tell the truth. Look him in the eye and tell the truth." That was his big acting advice. That's all you need, really. And so I take his advice in playing him. I take his essence. I've watched and read everything about him you can, and then I just play it for real. So.
Well, what a pleasure to have you all. Robert Creighton will see you on stage in
I'll be there.
Cagney, directed by Bill Castellino, and overseen and designed by Jim Morgan.
The Jack Warner of the off-Broadway theater world.
Great. Well, thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Bye. Our thanks to the Friends of Theater Talk for their significant contribution to this production. Theater Talk is made possible in part by the Frederick Lowe Foundation, the Corey and Bob Dinelli Charitable Fund, the Noel Coward Foundation, Carrie J. Fries, the Dorothy Strelson Foundation, plus public funds from the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, and the New York State Council on the Arts, a state agency.
We welcome your questions or comments for Theater Talk. Thank you and good night.